Welcome to the South African Equestrian Federation's podcast from the horse's mouth. Today we're covering a topic that always feels like a grudge purchase, I'm sure, to owners until we have something devastating happen, and that is vaccination protocol for horses in South Africa. Not just a necessity for competition horses, but rather for the greater biosphere of the well-being of our equestrian sport and our equine athletes. And here today I have our FEI SAEF Head Veterinarian, that's Dr. Sheelagh Higgerty, here to help give us some clarity and to make us understand the importance of following these protocols. Thank you so much for joining us, Sheelagh.
Thank you.
Sheelagh, can you give us a brief overview of the current vaccine protocols for sport horses in South Africa? And I'm talking obviously about registered sport horses that are competing under the SAEF, but I'm sure these are recommended vaccines for all horses.
Yeah, there are a lot more vaccines available than what we insist on. So SAEF for competition purposes and racing insist on two vaccines. The one is AHS and the other one is equine influenza. Those ones have to be given according to the vaccination protocol, and if they are not in line, theoretically they're ineligible to compete.
The AHS, African Horse Sickness Vaccine, for those people who don't know, those are two vaccines. We have done a separate podcast on this. Would you briefly just touch on what the protocol is for the African Horse Sickness Vaccine, when it should be given? I know we're entering winter here, so it is going to be a conversation that comes up.
Okay, so in general, African horse sickness, it's an infectious but not contagious disease. It's prevalent in the autumn, sort of late summer, autumn months. And so the requirement really is, from the point of view of competition, is that it consists of two vaccines, AHS1, AHS2. They have different strains in them. There are 9 strains, but they are not all in the vaccine. But we insist that they have at least an AHS1 and an AHS2 in each calendar year. So between the 1st of January and the 31st of December in each year, they must have had one each. In terms of racing, and the recommendation is they have to have one at 6 months, and then they have to have one 12 months and 18 months. So I recommend to my clients that if it's an imported horse or it's a foal, I try and get 3 vaccines in its first year.
Okay. And is that to build up that immunity?
Yes.
Okay.
Because those strains are quite close, so they need probably at least 5 vaccines. Not 5 vaccines,
at
one
once.
AHS1 is 1 and AHS2 is 2, 5 sets of vaccines in order to be immune. So I recommend that in their first year that they come in, we start and we try and get 3 in that late winter, spring season.
And you specifically recommended last time that people don't recommend in what you called high vector season.
Yes.
So that's when horse sickness is around. They must vaccinate in the low months.
Yes, we have a very interesting situation in our country in the sense that we have a free country. So the World Animal Health Organization states that no country should import horses from a country that has AHS is endemic. In South Africa, AHS is endemic. It occurs naturally here. So what South Africa did was set out to make the Western Cape a free country, a free zone, where we don't have it. So in that zone, they can vaccinate, but they can only vaccinate between the 1st of June and the 31st of October. And the rationale behind that is that we are using a live attenuated virus. So when we inject it, they have circulating virus. It has been proven in the outbreaks that they've had in the Western Cape that because they have a large population of naive horses that have not been vaccinated, that the vaccine was able to resort to virulence in the midge.
So the midge bit a vaccinated horse and then
picked up some of that virus, and it resorted to virulence. And when it bit another horse, it got African horse sickness. And that can happen, they have active virus for 40 days after vaccination. Hence the 31st of October, because their high midge time is in January, February, in the sort of when it's coming to autumn. So they're very strict about it. For the rest of the country, I'm not too fussed, because in most of them, particularly with competition horses, they should be well vaccinated. So we should not have naive populations. Maybe in more of the informal areas like the Transkei, that could occur, that you have a population of unvaccinated horses, somewhere like Lesotho, but they tend to be in that area. They're not moving around the country.
Okay.
They're not going to other places where there's a large...
SA champs or yes, okay.
Yeah.
And the equine influenza vaccine is given how many times a year?
Up until recently, they had to have a primary vaccination. The primary vaccination was a set regulation up until the 1st of January 2024, still 3. So the primary consists of what we call V1 and V2, and then V3 is the first booster, but you have to have those 3.
Okay.
Then after the 1st of January 2024, they shortened the period between V1, V2 and V3. I can mention them, but I'm sure everybody's going to forget the exact times. And basically...
Which is why it's important to get your vet to do your vaccines.
Yes,
but carry on.
One of the reasons,
Yeah.
yes. So theoretically, once you've done those 3, you thereafter need to vaccinate. You must never exceed the year. But you need to have a vaccine within 6 months and 21 days of a competition.
Okay.
So where you have competition throughout the year, you need to do it twice a year.
Okay.
Where you have a season, like a polo season or a polo cross season, that lasts for 6 months, you could be clever and vaccinate once a year.
Okay.
But
and just make sure it's within the 6 months and 21 days.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can still compete 6 months and 21 days plus 7 days, and it's a fine.
Okay.
21 days plus 7 days plus 7 days, it's a bigger fine. 21 days plus 3 weeks, it's an even bigger fine. After that, you're out.
Okay.
Completely.
We were just having a discussion about pony height measuring, and they were saying that if the vaccines aren't updated in the passport, it nullifies the horse for competitions. So
Well, I wouldn't say nullifies. I would say it makes it ineligible.
Ineligible, okay.
Ineligible for competition. And the whole idea behind these vaccinations and the veterinary regulations is actually welfare of the horse. So by insisting on vaccinations, we are ensuring that your horse, the competitor's horse, is protected from all other horses going to the show, and all the other horses are protected because you're in line with the vaccinations. So it's really important, where you have a lot of horses coming together, that your vaccinations are up to date. It's not people trying to be pedantic. It's not people trying to make money by fining. It's actually for the welfare of the horse.
The 2 things I want to touch on there. The one is that you mentioned 6 months and 21 days. What's the minimum amount of time you can vaccinate a horse before a show? You can't vaccinate it the day before a show and then compete the next day.
No, you can't vaccinate it within 7 days of an event. Any vaccine.
Okay.
And again, the reason behind that is some horses have a reaction. And it was quite interesting, because a lot of my clients don't take temperatures. And then we had this time when everybody was horse sickness. They were all taking temperatures. And I noted a number of my clients phoned me up 2 days after flu vax, the horse is running a temperature. And we don't notice it because the horse didn't go off its food.
But they're not feeling great. Yeah.
But they can. I think the more vaccines they have, the less likely they are to react. So that's really for the welfare of the horse, those 7 days.
Okay. And then we've mentioned the two mandatory vaccines. What are other core vaccines? You mentioned horses being in contact with other horses. I know that there was a herpes outbreak over in Europe, I think about a couple of years ago now. Strangles is one of the communicable diseases. What other vaccines are available to equestrians, and what should they consider giving their horses?
Well, I think any owner should always consult with their veterinarian. I think a lot depends on the area in the country that you reside in. And obviously the veterinarian would know what's currently going the rounds. The ones that I think important in general are West Nile virus. So West Nile virus is transmitted from birds to horses via mosquitoes. Horses are,
So we
are
can trust
not,
no flying things around horses. Like it's just bad news. Okay.
so, well, there are things that you can do to try and mitigate that, like fans and bug rugs and sprays and,
Yes.
you know, insect...
And the sheets, so our
Yes.
horses walk around looking like ghosts.
Yeah. But, and the reason behind that is no vaccine's 100% effective in 100% of cases. And it also depends on the challenge. So, effectively, and I'm diverting a little bit here, if your horse is vaccinated, you want it to have a little bit of field challenge because that promotes the immunity. But you don't want it to have an overwhelming challenge. So you don't want it to be bitten by 100 midges every night, of which 20 of them are carrying the virus, and that happens night after night after night. And it might happen for 10 days and the horse copes with it. But then it also gets EEV, and its immune system is
so overrun.
it's overrun, that it will then develop horse sickness.
Okay.
So I've diverted from your original question.
Sorry. So we're talking about
So
other vaccines
West,
that you get.
West Nile virus. I recommend that, and it's horses are not. It's not one, and the FEI have looked at it, and they actually wrote to me about it, looking at making it mandatory. The thing behind it is horses are not a source of further infection.
Okay.
They carry a very, very, very low parasitemia, and they're not considered important in the spread of the virus. It's from birds to horses and to humans. They're not the only ones that get at horses. The problem is that when they develop the neurological form, I have not found treatment very successful.
Okay.
So there the vaccine is given, and then a month later, and then it's once a year. So again, one would try and do it at a time, you know, before you get a high prevalence of mosquitoes. But I recommend it. I do my own horses, and what I do, I recommend to my clients.
The strangles vaccine?
Strangles vaccine, we had quite a few outbreaks of it, and you could obtain the vaccine. Then it became very hard, and I'm not sure, quite honestly, whether it is currently available.
Okay.
But no, I haven't done strangles vaccines for a long time.
Okay. And then the equine herpes virus vaccine, I think that is generally only administered to broodmares in the country.
Interestingly enough, they do it in racing because there's EHV1, which is usually related to abortion, and 4 to the respiratory infection. There was a vaccine called Resequin, which was tetanus, flu and herpes.
Okay.
It had it in it. You get 2 herpes vaccines now in this country. One is a pneumabort that is important for broodmares, and they give it at 5, 7, and 9 months. And I think that's very important if you have broodmares, and also if you have horses on a stud farm that are competing.
Yes, and we do have a lot of those crossover farms.
Otherwise, I think it's sort of like 6 monthly.
Okay.
And then you've got the other one, which I can't remember the name, which contains 1 and 4, and that's mainly for respiratory tract infections. In fact, the South African Equine Veterinary Association put out a sort of, let's say, an information brochure on on herpes virus, because there's a lot of debate about there is no specific vaccine against a neurological form. And when they had that outbreak in Europe, most of the horses that died because they developed a neurological form. Okay. The FEI got an expert panel together, and they debated the issues of whether they should make it mandatory or not. The belief is that vaccination reduces shedding. So if you reduce the shedding, you reduce the spread.
So but it might not help that horse, but it helps
It
others.
Can help prevent spread.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is that there is some thought process that too many vaccines actually promote the development of the neurological form.
Oh God, okay.
So it's a difficult one, and at the end,
horses.
At the end of their sort of deliberations, they decided not to recommend blanket use. So they did agree that vaccination would reduce spread.
Okay.
But for broodmares, very definitely important.
Okay. And then the last one, I suppose this is where you say what area of the country you're in is important. Tetanus, is that still
I think every
suggested?
horse should have tetanus.
How often?
Well, theoretically, if you do it and you give them a booster 6 weeks later, it could be every 2 years. But in my
Most horse
experience,
riders should probably have a tetanus as well if they...
beg your pardon?
Most horse riders probably also
Yeah.
need the odd tetanus vaccine for nails and things that get in their feet.
No, look, it's usually a deep-seated infection, but the problem is that it can take quite a long time to develop. And by the time you see the tetanus, it's very difficult to cure, and it's so easy to prevent. So typically with horses, it's like post-castration is one of the times that you'll see tetanus. It is included in like the flu vaccine, so it's so easy to give. I tend to give one with and one without if I'm doing it twice a year, because I don't believe owners are going to remember, well, if I do it now, I only have to do it in 2 years' time.
Yes.
So it's just easier to do it that way.
Okay. And the rabies vaccine?
Rabies vaccine, yes. I think if you're in an endemic part of the country, for instance, KZN, it's rife. There is no cure for it. So I would definitely be vaccinating horses if I lived in KZN. They had an interesting outbreak in Somerset West many years ago with a horse that got bitten by a rabid animal. But it's rare. It's rare in other parts of the country. But I think your vet would know. But I mean, for instance, KZN, it's very endemic. And interestingly enough, they have recently come up with seals.
Yes, I believe so.
Along the coast with rabies. So I think it's a lot more widespread. And again, vaccination is very successful. And it's not the most expensive.
Treatment is not.
No. Well, you know, you develop a vaccine because it's fatal. Like 90% of naive horses to AHS will die. Or you develop a vaccine because it has high economic loss, like equine influenza. So if you have an outbreak of it, all competition stops, all racing stops, and you think in terms of the loss of revenue, it's huge. Rabies is one that's invariably fatal.
And when we're looking at our SAEF competition vaccination guideline for those mandatory vaccines, how does that align with international protocols? Is there an overarching, does the FEI have an overarching one, or does each country guide themselves?
Well, in the FEI regulations, AHS is not mentioned, but it's mandatory in this country. That it's in the veterinary, Paraveterinary and Veterinary Act, that they must be vaccinated for it, but it's not an FEI recommendation. So each country may have some vaccine that they may insist on. For instance, Australia, the Hendra virus.
Yes.
That's huge. That's fatal in humans. So they will do a vaccine in the areas where it's endemic, and that's kind of mandatory. So you may have individual variations depending on the country. The only two that the FEI insist on is the equine influenza. That's the only one, well, two. We insist on the AHS.
Okay. So we have covered which vaccines are compulsory but not compulsory but strongly recommended. My next question is a big dispute that comes along with this is, why does a veterinarian have to be doing these injections?
Okay.
Because there's obviously a cost factor associated with it.
Yes, there is a cost factor because you are, a veterinarian is a professional. They've spent quite a considerable period of time at university. They spend quite a considerable amount of time and money maintaining that registration, because every year they have to prove they've done this continuing professional development, which costs them money. They have to attend so many hours of professional development. They are also, as a professional, belong to a council, which is a legal body, and should they transgress it by being unprofessional, for instance, signing passports where they haven't vaccinated it, then they can be held to account and they can lose their license to practice. So one is that we can hold somebody accountable for misdemeanors, for not doing things correctly. The second thing is that the passport is a certificate, and as such it's a legal document. So therefore it must be signed by a professional.
It's traceability as well for the
Yes.
vaccinations, for
Yes.
the patients.
And the records, because a veterinarian's required by law to keep a record of the horses that they vaccinated,
Sure,
and the batch numbers.
And there's long-reaching ramifications for, I know it's a very small minority, but exporting horses and such.
Well, I think not only exporting, but I think also from the point of view of insurance. You have a very high value horse. The insurance companies are becoming part of their clauses are if there is a vaccine available for a disease and the horse is not vaccinated and it dies of that disease, they won't cover it.
Wow, okay.
And
that's important to know.
yes, so read the clause.
Read your fine print.
Read the fine print. I mean, it's not a general rule that everybody in the country is going to vaccinate against rabies. But if you lived in Natal in the farmland where it's endemic and then you get a horse with rabies and it's insured, I don't know, but there are a number of insurance companies that state that if there is a vaccine available and the horse dies from that disease...
There's probably a few listening who are just quickly going to go put it into their fine print after listening to you, Sheelagh. Sheelagh, you spoke about, and I think it's an interesting thing, that it's not just the loss of life, it's an economic loss.
Yes.
So we were talking about the necessity of the equine influenza vaccine, and I just think it's interesting to touch on that, as well as the horse sickness outbreaks that they have had in parts of Europe, I think 20 or 30 years ago now. How do those losses impact the industry?
Well, interesting, Thailand had an outbreak, and that's pretty recent. And that outbreak was tied down to zebra exports from South Africa. And they were allowed to vaccinate because in the old days, Onderstepoort would produce an inactive, they would isolate what strain it was, and they would produce an inactivated vaccine to that strain and then go and vaccinate all the horses. In this instance, I know they were using the live attenuated vaccine. I don't know what the population of horses in Thailand is, but it's small. It's very small.
It was small after the horse sickness outbreak, I'm sure.
Well, I think they lost, I stand corrected, between 2,000 and 4,000 horses.
Sure.
And if you've got a very small population, then that's a huge loss.
Significant loss.
Yes. I think in Portugal and Spain, also many years ago,
about
I think they lost 300,000 horses.
That's horrifying.
Yeah. So in naive horses, it's terrifying. So vaccine is in actual fact effective.
Yeah. And then we spoke about the economic loss briefly, about the equine influenza, that it wasn't necessarily fatal, but because it's so contagious, it shut down racing and competition. And
well, if you have an outbreak of equine influenza and you run a riding stable, theoretically you should put yourself into quarantine. So you may not have people come ride the horses and visit the horses because they can carry it somewhere else. You can't have any competitions. So for that period, and it's usually 3 weeks from the last positive case.
Okay.
So you start off with the first one. By the time you've diagnosed that, you've got a whole lot more in the yard because they've been incubating it.
Okay.
So by the time you've had the last one, you could be out for 2-3 months easily.
Yeah.
And in terms of racing, you think of race days, the grooms, the betting. It's huge. The TV, everything. It's huge. I mean, you're looking at a minimum of 3 months where nothing happens. I mean, you look at what COVID did.
That went on and on.
Yeah.
And I think movement with horses is also such an important thing to consider. And I know a lot of yards feel like they might not be competitive, but especially in a equine dense area such as Kyalami, your next door neighbors almost definitely are. Yeah. And you talked about that shows, you just need to share a water bucket and, things are going rife.
Well, I would always recommend a chose to take your own water bucket.
No, you hope.
But you know, one of the worst ways of transmitting diseases is via transport, particularly these companies that pick up 12 and 13, 14 horses, and they're dropping them all over the country.
I think FEI had a very interesting it's called biosecurity campaign that they ran called Think Outside of the Box. But I think they was talking about Think Inside of the Box, and they were talking about these isolation stables that they use for big FEI events and how strict the biosecurity is.
Yeah.
And that's also actually from a doping perspective, because I do believe that one of the grooms had a cup of coffee and a cigarette and then urinated in his horse's stable. And there was, I'm not sure how much of an urban legend that is, but the fear of God into enough people. These vaccinations that we've discussed, how do owners decide? Do owners guide themselves? Well, how do they decide which vaccines, optional extra vaccines, they should include in their annual program?
I think that owners should consult their veterinarians. I think that the vet in that area knows what's going around. We have the 2 that are mandatory. I would definitely recommend any horse owner has tetanus. It's such a simple vaccine to do, and you know, again, in most cases, tetanus is fatal. You can try hypoimmune serum. I've tried it. We still lost the horse. But the honest word used to make it. I'm not too sure whether they make it anymore. But I think it really is quite a cheap vaccine. So
it would be interesting to try and quantify the cost of the vaccine versus the cost of treatment, let alone the cost of losing that animal potentially. I mean, that's...
Well, your African horse sickness treatment is huge. I personally think that the horses that survive have some immunity. They get sick. There is a sort of regimen that I have heard somebody said I follow, and I've saved them. I've tried everything over the years. Every new thing that comes out, I've tried. I save some, then the next year I think, well, that's a treatment, and they all die. So I think the most important thing is vaccination. And to reduce the exposure. So you can do vector protection. You can have fans in the stable.
Can you just explain briefly for people who are hearing the concept of vector protection for the first time, what that entails?
So vector protection is having netting which is small enough to prevent midges entering. You can also spray this the netting, in other words, whatever vector protection you have. You can spray with insecticides specifically for mosquitoes and midges.
Are there ones that are known to be more effective?
Like Fendona.
Okay.
And you don't need to spray on a daily basis.
Oh.
They used it in malaria control in Africa, where they used to spray the roofs and houses. You can dip your bug rugs in them. Obviously, you've got to let them dry, but again, it's not a daily thing you have to do, maybe once a month. And you can spray the stables. And then on the horses, you can put sprays, and the only one that scientifically has research on it that is effective is things with DEET in it.
So that's like your tabards.
There's also summer spray, which it's got to have, I think it's 15% DEET in it.
Okay. I think you raise an interesting thing there, percentages.
Yeah.
Because I think you can get some backyard pharmaceuticals that do contain, and this is something we've spoken about again in a previous podcast. I think we spoke about nutraceuticals and the supplement industry.
Yeah.
And you have to be incredibly careful just because, you know, about what quantities are in the things that you're using.
And also contamination. I had a question from somebody about using a drug. Could she use it? And it's a drug that is contained in a medication that's supposed to have a calming effect. If you read the FEI preamble to clean sport, it's prohibited to use anything that alters the mood. The substance in it is not, it's not prohibited. But the biggest thing, and there have been some very high profile cases, is contamination, because the manufacture of these is not so strict as the pharmaceuticals. So they may have been producing something with a prohibited substance in it, like caffeine or
On
something
the last
else,
production line.
and it contaminates it. And I mean, there was which are the two big events? The eventing events overseas. There's Blenheim and the other one.
Badminton. Okay.
There was an Australian, and he was caught, and he was able to prove it was contamination, but he still lost the title.
You have to be
He still had a huge bill and having lawyers, and being able. But I think what the FEI state, if you're able to prove how it got into the horse, and you can prove no fault,
won't stay suspended,
then you don't get banned for 2 years.
Okay.
You still lose everything.
The horse was under the influence, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it would be very interesting. We were discussing with Peter Swanepoel, who's involved in the judiciary for SAEF, that the blame ultimately, even if your management is handed over, if you're not the owner of the horse, you're just the rider. Unfortunately, it does in the code of conduct, FEI and SAEF, you are the responsible party.
Yeah.
So it's well worth the riders being very well aware of what goes into those things.
They have, because of that, and they have an endurance, the trainers a
Oh, great.
respondee or
in case you hate your rider, you just...
Well, because in many cases the riders not training the horses. No. They come and they ride on the day. And the other one is in vaulting, the longeur is automatically responsible.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you can, depending on the circumstances, additional people can become also...
You can throw everyone under the bus with you.
Yeah.
I think it's important for everyone also who participates in a discipline to be very familiar with their discipline association code of conduct and their specific rules. Yeah. Because we've got so many disciplines that you mentioned tent pegging earlier on. The rules would be completely different, not completely, but there would be variations from...
Yeah, the only thing is that everything, all the SAEF disciplines...
come under the same umbrella.
Come under the same umbrella of the veterinary regulations. What differs is obviously their own rules and regulations pertaining to the actual competition.
Okay.
But in terms of the veterinary regulations, once you're an SAEF member, the veterinary regulations apply.
What are the welfare implications of under-vaccinating horses or skipping key vaccinations? And I'm thinking of people who maybe have a horse that's out of action for a little while and they want to... I don't know.
Under vaccination is obviously you open your horse more likely to get in an infection. So if it's under vaccinated, it's probably not got sufficient immunity. So should there be a circulating virus around, your horse is more likely to pick it up than another well-vaccinated horse. And I think it would bode, in terms of whatever you pay for the horse or whatever you've paid for the horse, it costs the same to keep it. And now you've paid for the horse and you spent years training it. Now it gets sick because you didn't bother to vaccinate it. I think it's very sad.
I think unfortunately anyone who's involved in horses, frugality is not one of the better known traits for our sport. Are there any risks or side effects associated with the opposite end, with over-vaccination or with incorrect scheduling?
Yes, over-vaccination, I think probably, and I would say more to do with vaccines get administered too close. And why we've said 3 weeks, I think 3 weeks is probably a bit close.
That's the African horse sickness vaccine.
Any vaccine.
Oh, okay.
So even equine influenza.
Okay, when you give
the minimum period, the minimum, the closest you can do it is 3 weeks. And really it has to do with the process of immunization. I'm not an immunologist or a scientist in that terms, but when you vaccinate an animal, it proceeds to start immunizing. And it's this process, whether it's an active immunization or an inflammatory reaction, you give another one, it interferes with the process of the first. So you effectively, if you give AHS and you go and give the next one in 19 days, you effectively nullify both.
Okay.
So it's no good, well, I'll just take it. Well, I'll give him the second one on the 19th and then go and give the first one, but I'll wait 21 days. You've actually made both ineffective. So it really has to do with, I mean, I've even had somebody who vaccinated 1 and 2 on the same day. It's...
No. And again, important for the veterinary interaction here, I think, for the accountability and the traceability. We spoke about how important timing is when it comes to vaccination in relation to competitions. I just want to touch base on that again, that it's not just from a legitimacy perspective, but it comes down to a core, this whole discussion I think is really important to keep reframing it, that it's a welfare of the horse issue. Whether you're riding too soon after giving a vaccine or whether you've fallen out of your vaccine regiment, the SAEF is trying to govern wellness of the horse.
Yes, I mean, these regulations and the vaccine protocols have been put in place based on good scientific knowledge. So it's not a thumbsuck, it's based on scientific knowledge. That the best way for horses' health when they come together to protect all these horses, my horse, your horse, everybody else's horse, is to have a vaccinated population. So they can't be bringing disease to a competition and they won't be taking it home and spreading the disease. So that is welfare, that is equine welfare, because we're looking after all, it's the horse that's the athlete. It's the owner that merely rides it. I mean, yes, it's a combination, but the horse is an equine athlete and we should be looking after its health.
What are the most common mistakes owners make with vaccine schedules?
I think the most common mistake is that it's a difficult one because some owners feel it's up to the vet. A lot of vets, and I know in small animal practice, they'll send out an annual vaccine reminder. We did this for horses and we phoned them and said, your horse is now due. They'd say, okay, well, we'll get back to you. We'd phone them 2 weeks later and they'd say, well, we'll get back to you. So it's not really the veterinarian's responsibility to advise you when it's done. It's really the owner's responsibility to take note of when the vaccine's done, find out from the vet when they need to be done, and then to make sure it's done in time. Because if you're out by 1 day, it's 1 day, it's still out.
Okay.
And you know, that's unfortunate.
And the ramifications of that, if you said you'll be ineligible to compete at that competition, then do you need to go through, if you've fallen out of your vaccine regime, you need to go back through the entire protocol. You need to...
If you're looking at equine influenza,
yes,
and you've exceeded the year, you will have to go back to the primary vaccination.
Okay. How should vaccination records be managed to ensure compliance and traceability? So we touched on this briefly in the last question, but it basically, the owners need to...
Well, I think
take accountability.
the passport is the certificate, and that's the documentation. I, as an owner, would take photocopies of it, so that should it get lost, you've got that can then be. You can't staple those pages into a new passport because that's illegal, but you at least have that. And from the veterinarian's point of view, by law, veterinarians are required to have the identity of the horse, the vaccine, the batch number, the date they did it. So you can always go to your vet and say, well, I've lost my passport, can you put in the vaccine dates? Interesting enough, if a passport comes to my attention and let's say the horse is 15 years old, but its passport was only stamped in 2020, or it only had the ID done in 2020, but the passport was issued to it in 2015, and it had all those vaccines in it. Every single vaccine before the identification is null and void.
Wow, okay.
Because how did you identify it? And the only way you can make it positive is if it had a microchip and the vet has recorded that microchip.
Okay.
Then you can positively identify it by the microchip. But let's say I get asked today to go and do a passport ID on a horse. So today is 2026, but the passport was issued in 2022 and it's had a number of vaccines. unless it's got a microchip that whatever vaccines were administered was recorded in the vet's records, they're null and void.
Sheelagh, I think the last time that I spoke to you, we had discussed this, and I'm sure there hasn't been much movement on it, but the FEI was looking at doing a digital passport. Has there been any further movements on that?
Yes, they've rolled it out in Europe.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. But interesting enough, it's not a standalone at this point.
Okay.
But they have, it's called the EquiPass.
Okay.
And they have rolled it out in Europe.
Okay.
But only Europe at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would make this hopefully record keeping and the concept of a lost passport.
Well, yes, in a way, because you would then, the vet could go online and put it on. My problem, and maybe I'm technologically very dumb, but my problem with the FEI apps is when you go to a show and you're doing the horse examination on arrival, we don't have signal.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And you've got to put in the microchip number and it'll call up the horse.
And especially in South Africa where we don't have those blanket areas of Wi-Fi that you have in Europe.
No. So I've found out that it's easier for me just to do it all because it takes too long. Then I go and sit somewhere where I can have Wi-Fi, and then I put it in. They say there's an offline way, but how do you look up the microchip offline? So it's...
New problems.
I find digitally, yes, it's a way of the future, but you have to have more coverage than we have to make it universal.
How do vaccination requirements impact international travel and competition eligibility? I know that this is for the 1% of the 1%. What are the considerations?
Any horse leaving here has a quarantine in this country. And in many cases, a residency in the so-called free zone. So they have to reside there for a period of time. They don't have to
prove they aren't harboring African horse sickness, or
yes, that they're resident in that country. For instance, if a horse goes from Zambia and wants to come here, it's got to be 3 months residency in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
If it comes from Kenya, it's 3 months residency in Zimbabwe. I'm not too sure of the residency requirements here, whether it's 90 days or 45 days, and then it's 3 weeks in quarantine. In fact, I think it's 2 weeks now.
Okay.
And then they fly to wherever. There will be an import quarantine period in Europe, and the import country, based on the terrestrial code, the WOA terrestrial code, will designate what they require for horses coming into the country.
So they might require other vaccines.
They might require other vaccines. In general, I believe it's only equine influenza. There was a problem with horses going to Mauritius, that they required that the first vaccine and the booster was the same make. In other words, if you used Frequenza, you had to use Frequenza for the first booster. There has been research on that where they've used different vaccines, and in actual fact, in the short term, it promotes a higher response.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
A higher antibody response. In the long term, they believed it made no difference.
Okay.
So from an SAEF point of view, it doesn't matter whether you use the same manufacturer or not. For some of the importing countries, like I think it was Mauritius, insisted it was the same.
Okay.
I'm not sure about other countries.
You said in Australia there's a vaccine in Australia that if horses were exported that they would need to have there.
No, I mean it's interesting because they are going to be having the 2032 Olympic Games, and they're having it in Brisbane, and Brisbane is in the centre of the Hendra virus.
Yes.
So there are many vets that if horses have been in that area, many vets won't look at those horses unless they've been vaccinated.
Okay.
Because it's fatal to people.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's transmitted by bats.
Jeez, bats are also the gift.
And in that area, and that they have these
flying things, flying things, Sheelagh. You see, Flies are looking good at the moment compared to everything else that we have to worry about. In the event of a disease outbreak, how do established vaccine protocols help to protect not just the individual horses, but the broader equestrian community?
Well, we have, according to our government regulations, if there is an outbreak, there's an immediate quarantine for 30 kilometers around the outbreak. So there's
No movement.
No movement.
Okay.
There's no movement into the free zone. They do not stop movement going to local shows. Some of the disciplines have instigated, if you've had an outbreak on your property, you may not compete for a period of time after the outbreak. Those are individual discipline requirements.
Okay.
SAEF, we don't have a requirement. But I think what's important and what people need to think about is that if you've had a case on your property which died of African horse sickness, it means you've got infected midges on your property. You may have other horses that have been bitten by infected midges, maybe carrying the virus but showing no clinical signs. So there are two things here. You take it to a show and you stress it. You may compromise that animal because if it's been stressed, it's not so immunely competent and could develop the disease. The second thing is that your horse, theoretically all other horses are well vaccinated, but you're taking your horse to a show where it could be bitten by mosquitoes. Those mosquitoes can't bite my horse that's maybe carrying it and go next door and bite and transmit it. There's a period within the midge that it has to develop, which is considered between 5 and 8 days before it can transmit it. Your incubation period in the horse is 8 to 10 days. So it's not a question that it's contagious like equine influenza is, at immediate transmission.
Okay.
So there is a latent period. But what it is that your horse may be exposed to it, that virus. I don't believe, and they haven't proven this yet, that they did in the naive horses, that vaccine strains resorted to virulence. But those were in basically naive populations in the Western Cape. They've not proved that in horses
Other areas. Okay.
other areas. So we are assuming that if you take a horse to a show, everybody else is well vaccinated. But there is, I think, some responsibility in feeling that my horses, I've got
Yes.
AHS on my property. What horse that appears healthy that I'm taking to a show actually may be carrying it, and I may just push it over the edge. Those are things.
Sheelagh, what are considered notifiable diseases in South Africa when it comes to horses? And how do owners go about? I mean, we do assume that most people will call
it's
it
really
vets,
the
but
responsibility of veterinarians.
Okay.
There is this case that the first case of African horse sickness should be laboratory confirmed. Thereafter, it can be on symptoms. So in an area, the first time I go, I can confirm it with PCR testing. Thereafter, if they have more horses on the property, I just make it a rule that any horse in the summer months that runs at temperature gets tested.
Okay.
I just think one needs to know. That's one way of doing it, that you positively identify them. Then there's, I think your question was, what have you...
Notifiable diseases.
Yes, so African horse sickness is one. If we had an outbreak of equine influenza, that's another. Rabies is... So most of your zoonotic diseases, like that are transmitted from animals to man, that rabies would definitely be notifiable. They used to, if there was a case of rabies, and we often had it in Deep Sloot, the government would go out and vaccinate. They would do blanket vaccinations.
Oh, that's incredible.
They're
state
not,
vets. Okay.
They're not the state vets. They're not doing it anymore.
Okay.
Which is sad, because I think it would do a lot of prevention.
Okay. What is the relationship between, you said we spoke about how the SAEF is laying out these vaccine protocols in order to protect the welfare of the horse. What is the relationship between the South African Veterinary Council and the SAEF? They're obviously taking guidance from the Veterinary Council.
Well, the guidance we take is that in order to practice in this country, you have to be registered with Veterinary Council. So that being registered requires an annual fee, and it requires that you keep up to date. And obviously there's their standard of ethics, of professionalism, integrity, and so on. In the case where we've got a new directive, like this vaccine directive, we would send it to Veterinary Council, because we don't have access to the mailing list of every vet in the country.
Okay.
There are many rural vets who do not belong to the South African equine vet. Yes.
Perhaps.
But you're in the rural areas, you might have your production vets. So in a case where we want something to go out as broadly as possible, we would ask Veterinary Council to do it as a MailChimp. And then they drop everybody a mail stating that. So the Veterinary Council is purely a regulatory council for veterinarians.
Okay.
You
so
can
who
lay
creates the vaccine protocol? Where do those guidelines originate from within the SAEF?
Well, based on international
Okay.
standards and obviously research and advice. They have an international African horse sickness committee, and they will consult with them. The FEI has an epidemiological wing that they would send things to, would consider them. So it's basically based on scientific evidence.
Okay. For owners who are looking for more information on horse welfare, not just for vaccines, are there any resources that we can direct them to?
The FEI has a page called Campus.
Yes, the FEI Campus.
FEI Campus. You don't have to be registered with the FEI to access it. It's free to everybody. They have a lot of information on welfare, on identification, on catastrophic injuries, on colours of the horse. I mean, you name it. There are so many, let's say, little tutorials or explanations, and then there's a little questionnaire afterwards if you want to do it. But there's a lot of information there, and I think the new thing that we've touched on but we never mentioned it is the social license to operate.
Yes.
And the social license to operate is these days very important. And that is basically welfare. But it's also the perception the public would have of the SAEF that our house is in order, that we know we've got good rules in place, and that when there are transgressors, we are able to act about it. So that the public and the general public who don't really know too much about horses or competition believe that we're doing a good job.
Yes.
And that is really protecting the welfare of the horse.
Yeah, that we're acting in the interest of the horse. And I think that leads us on to our last question very nicely. What is your key advice to owners and riders to ensure that they're protecting both their horses and the sport as a whole?
Well, I think obviously the veterinary regulations are there for the welfare, so the vaccines that need to be done, they should do. And I think they should consult their veterinarian as to any other vaccines that they should be doing, and obviously what time of the year. There's quite a lot of leeway in terms of competition, that it's like 6 months and 21 days, because we are aware that horses compete, so you give them a little, but it's not on the dot. In racing, 6 months, not a day over. Otherwise you get fined. 6 months. So there is leeway, and I mean, you can't tell me that if we're going to go onto annual vaccination, that you can't have the horse vaccinated in that year. And it's really, I mean, it's really the rules are there for everybody's protection.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? You did mention now, I don't know if you want to delve into that the flu vaccine is looking to become an annual vaccine.
Yes, the SAEF put out a directive, and I will go through it again. It seems to have caused a tremendous amount of confusion. That horses born after the 1st of January 2020, which means that they're now going into their sixth year, that those horses must demonstrate a primary vaccination. That is V1, V2, and V3. But up until the 1st of January 2024, it was based on Between V1 and V2, 92 days, and between V2 and V3, it was 7 months.
It's getting very complicated.
After the 1st of January, 2024, it was 60 days and 6 months and 21 days.
Okay.
So that takes away the FEI regulation that insists that you have to demonstrate a primary
biannual,
vaccination
okay.
going back to 2005.
Oh, okay.
That's
Right.
20 years.
That's dramatic. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
So
we don't have
in-
any clarity on that as of yet, though.
So no. So basically, we're saying any horse that's never been vaccinated before or was born after the 1st of January, that they have to have this primary.
Okay.
Horses that were born prior to that and have been vaccinated must demonstrate a minimum, because if they were born prior to 2020, they would have been born in 2019, must demonstrate a minimum of 6 years of vaccination without ever exceeding the year.
Okay.
So if they got vaccinated in 2019, I had one the other day, 2020, 2021, and then they went from 2021 to 2023. Now they want to know, can they compete? And I said, but you exceeded, you had your primary vaccination in 2019, and then you went
They have to go back. They have to do the
you've
primary
exceeded,
vaccine,
you
the
went 2
boosters.
years.
Okay.
So now you have to have the primaries. It was in 2020, between 2021 and 2023, they didn't do it. Now you can't suddenly start doing it and say, well, I had my primary in 2019, because you exceeded the 2 years.
Okay. So the moral of the story, keep a good vaccine schedule,
Yes,
listen to your vet,
yes,
and be aware of your discipline association rules
yes,
as well.
yes.
Great. Sheelagh, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Listen to your vet.
Yeah, definitely.
I would like to say thank you to our head veterinarian, that's Dr. Sheelagh Higgerty, for joining us here today on the South African Equestrian Federation's podcast From the Horse's Mouth, talking about vaccine mandates and how to keep our horses and our sport healthy, happy, and safe. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.